Hello, you are very welcome to this interactive introduction to the Rainbow Map with me, Andrew Thomas, a practicing psychotherapist based in the UK, and our family friend Gashil, who will ask questions and share reflections as we move through the PowerPoint presentation. If you have not guessed already, I'm not that comfortable just talking straight to the camera, so if you can bear with me while I do this introduction, things do lighten up when Gashil joins us in a couple of minutes. I first started to develop the Rainbow Map in 2014 to help my clients become more self-aware of the whole brain and body experience, before, during and after fight, flight and or high played dead episodes of discomfort. That awareness helped them develop ways to notice when their behaviours were becoming compulsive, causing unwanted outcomes. We could then use that raised level of self-awareness to improve existing or develop new resources that reduce the intensity and duration of their discomfort. They were able to activate those resources more reliably and earlier by learning how to notice themselves starting to trigger in response to what was happening within and around them. This led to improved psychological resilience based on the feedback coming in from my own work and that of other professionals using the Rainbow Map and other trigger-orientated therapy concepts such as reflective mind and reactive brain-body model. So I'm very grateful to our friend Gashil, family friend Gashil, for taking time out from a busy life to join us today. By the way, this will be the first time she's seen the slides, which I think makes this experience more spontaneous and hope useful to you. Hi Gashil, could you perhaps say a few words about yourself, then we will share screen and get started.
Hey Andrew, really nice to see you again and looking forward to seeing how you're going to surprise me today.
Oh, great. Thank you, Gashil. And thank you. I know you're really busy. So again, I really appreciate the time that you're spending joining me today. So I'm going to, if that's okay with you, I'm going to share screen and we're going to have a look at the PDF that I've got for this module, which is available on the website and the YouTube channel, as I mentioned before. So Gashil, if you could just read each slide. No need to speed read it or anything like that. Just read it at whatever is the comfortable pace for you. If you've got any questions or thoughts, just raise them and then we'll move on to the next slide. And if you don't have any, say so, we'll just move on.
Yeah. Yes, all makes sense.
Okay.
So I think the main thought here is that I really like how it's for the layman as well as people who are skilled and educated in the psychotherapy space. It makes it very useful.
Yeah, that's my claim. I mean, but the proof is in the pudding. With the Rainbow Map, if you go onto any of the reflection sessions where psychotherapists talk about their experience, they're regularly saying how their clients take the Rainbow Map away with them and they use it between sessions and after sessions. And that's when I first started training it to psychotherapist, I was a bit uneasy about thinking it was going to be a self-help tool. But after about 300 therapists had been trained in the use of the Rainbow Map and there was no feedback about adverse effects, I became confident and comfortable that it could be considered to be a self-help tool, which is why it's directly available to members of the public on this trigger-orientated therapy website. So I think it's a useful, in my view, and safe self-help tool.
Yes, safe is important, especially when triggers.
Yeah. So do you any other questions or reflections on this slide?
Nope, next slide.
Thanks.
I think that makes complete sense. I think it's good that people can take it away in their own time and absorb it and play around with different methods that work for them.
Yeah, and there are just other, what I'm trying to highlight here, there are other resources on the website other than just this module. So if this module sort of piques any interest, then there's a whole range of other stuff there that can deepen your understanding. Whether you're a psychotherapist or an individual, I think hopefully they all have some relevance. Any other questions or reflections on that? Because there you can see the rainbow map, but I'll come back and explain what each of the elements of it are as we go through this presentation. So here we go.
So I think the main thing that stands out here is that clients might not always, or people may not always be aware or may not perceive when things have become intolerable. They might downplay their feelings and their emotions and their thoughts because they're so used to having them. So it's great to be able to have a tool that might help with identifying triggers earlier.
Yeah, well, that's sorry.
And things.
Yeah, no, that's very much what the rainbow map is about. And also, as you say there, we'll come on to that, the downplaying of stuff, the self-anesthetizing. The rainbow map also picks that type of what I would call avoidant behavior, or a self-anesthetizing type of behavior that we all have to some extent in different aspects of our lives. Shall I move on? Is that okay?
Yep. It was just to notice how we change. That makes a lot of sense about kind of the car dashboard. Not just in the sense that it really does convey a lot of complex information very quickly and accessibly. It's also conveying that without a dashboard, we may not have much to go on critical pieces of information, like how much petrol is left in your car, how fast are you going. I don't actually have a driving license, so I can't comment too much on this, but there are some critical pieces of information here that I think are so important to just have quickly, and more quickly, I think, than if you are caught up and in that trigger cycle. Sometimes it's hard to see things quickly and clearly. I think maybe this is a rainbow map as a way to just break everything down and make it clear and simple and accessible. And
if that's what you're picking up from these slides, then that's very much what it's about. And it was a reaction to some of the training I went on. I started developing it in 2014. And some of the training I was going on, it was turning into a sort of an anatomical lesson, in the human body and the human brain. And I did sort of wonder whether I could somehow melt that away, but keep the usefulness of helping people be aware that our system, in many ways, automatically drives stuff, and we're constantly reacting to ourselves and also to the world around us. So the rainbow map really did come out of, well, how could I engage and help my clients engage in that type of awareness, but not land on them complex language and complex concepts. That isn't saying that I don't think complex language and complex theory isn't very useful, because researchers, be they neuroscientists or psychotherapists who are pushing the boundaries forwards, they probably need that complexity in the language so they can communicate with each other rapidly and in great detail. So this isn't saying, we mustn't have complex language, but maybe it has its time and its place. And
yeah, and especially to the layman who does experience trigger cycles, simplification is one of the most helpful things that I, as a patient, have found. Kind of dealing with my own trigger cycles is just simplifying things. Like, what do I absolutely need to pay attention to? What matters? What is rational and not? And like, how do I want to act on this going forward?
I want to clarify there, as you say that you haven't been my patient, and you haven't been working with the Rainbow Map. You've been working with other people. So So
what's flag, by the way?
Pardon?
What's a trigger flag?
The trigger flag and the trigger cycle down there are two distinct things that you can draw out of the Rainbow Map. They're not necessary. People work with it and don't specifically target those as outcomes, but a lot do. And I'll come on to those. Those again are adding distinction and awareness to what's actually happening to you. I mean, a big thing about the Rainbow Map is it's a tool and not a modality, which a psychotherapist tuning into this will sort of really get what I mean by that. But it's very much there to enable what's going on in the therapy room to be transferred out into the real world, because there's an awful lot of wonderful stuff going on in therapy world, the rooms. But if we can't notice ourselves activating or triggering outside, it's very hard to then bring all of that wonderful stuff into our lives.
Yes.
So anything else on that, or should we move forward? Yeah.
Let's forward. Very clear.
You okay with that?
Well, yeah. So the trigger flag is really the intersect between the reflective mind and the reactive body, and just trying to create a bit more of a connection between the two.
Yeah, I've emphasized the position of the trigger flag, but as you can see, as we trigger into fight, flight, or hide, play, dead types of mode of behavior, our reflective capacity shrinks very rapidly. We've always got reactive brain and reactive body capacity. We've always got that. But the reflective mind is a very volatile part of the human system. And it can shrink and very rapidly. And if there isn't much of it available, then we are just full of compulsive thoughts, emotions, and then they spill out into behaviors. And that trigger flag is there to catch that happening. So I've sort of emphasized its location there, but I think the main messages here are just how quick, how volatile that part of our system is. And also that our system, according to me, can be resolved down to these three main capacities. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's masking immense complexity saying this.
Of course. It's very difficult to see it laid out in a way that people can relate to day to day.
Yeah, and that that immense
And-
capacity delivers this.
Yeah. Sorry, I think there's a bit of a lag.
Yeah. Well,
As there will.
I'm on the moon at the moment, so there's just a bit of a. So shall I move on to the next one?
Yep, all good. What does triggering mean in the context of the rainbow map? Just a regular train home. Makes sense.
Okay, great. Shall I move on?
Linear path to like, these are the people who find it useful and this is why it's helpful. I completely understand it.
Yeah, it's trying to distinguish that we all get a bit irritated at times or a little bit sad, but that's different from when our survival system, which we've all got, unreformed primeval survival system that's within us all. I mean, for example, in the room you're in now, if the door were to open, your survival system would instantaneously dominate you because you would be forced to turn around and look at the door and check who's coming in. If a fly just flies into the periphery of your vision, even though you aren't consciously, or I'm not monitoring that peripheral area, our survival system is all the time. So the rainbow map is really dealing with the type of triggering where the survival system is really starting to come alive and starting to dominate what we're thinking, how we're reacting to ourselves, and what's coming out of us in relation to how we connect with the outside world. And the rainbow map. Sorry, Kashil.
Is it also helping us manage that survival? I don't know if we can, but like manage how we respond to that survival system.
Yeah, no, that's yes.
Actually dangerous.
Not in and of itself, but it's a tool that helps you focus in and develop resources with your psychotherapist or with yourself. You know, it helps you focus in on developing resources that will help achieve that outcome. And that's why it's being integrated into so many different modalities: person-centered therapy, Gestalt, EFT, EMDR, you know, I could name them there. It is because it's a tool within that. And then those therapists and psychotherapists and counselors are then using their other knowledge and awareness to then build on what you're talking about. How can you diminish the outcomes and the bad effects, the unwanted effects? And it itself has some psychotherapeutic resource generating value in of itself. Is that okay? Shall I move? Is that?
Yeah. Involve the trigger in this one. Yep, all clear.
You okay with that? Great. So these next slides, I'm just taking you through the different elements of the rainbow map now.
Okay. Red band, extreme discomfort, no electrical capacity, blue dawn, orange band, intense transition band with great influence. All clear apart from the last bit.
Yeah, that's a little bit for the psychotherapists and counsellors tuning into this, but you might want to Google sometimes Siegel's window of tolerance, and in that it focuses on how we can be regulated, how when we're regulated we can deal with issues, we're not overwhelmed by stuff. And then we can become dysregulated, and then we struggle to deal with ourselves and the world around us. And what this slide is sort of saying is that yellow band there is in effect that line on Siegel's window of tolerance. It's that line expanded, because in my view, the work I've done, that transitional area, therein lies therapeutic gold dust. There's, you'll see the below bit, there's transitional area down there as well. When we're up here, if ever we get up here to that ragey thing, our short-term memory is gone. We're evolved not to be reflective, because if you're escaping from a threat to your life, our ancestors, the ones that survived, aren't the ones that sort of reflected on how best to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. They just did it.
Yeah.
And they took away the reflective element so that everything speeded up.
Yeah.
And became very powerful. So this transitional area is a really important area in virtually all modalities, whether they're aware of it or not. But approaches like EMDR, phobia-orientated CBT, they very specifically work in these areas. And virtually all other mainstream modalities I do, they may not describe it specifically, but I would imagine psychotherapists tuning into this, it would resonate with them that quite a lot that some of the beneficial work they do is when the client is actually opening up in the therapy room and talking about what is quite distressing and uncomfortable.
Is as a human, as a person who doesn't have kind of the academic, I'm not a trained psychotherapist, I can really see or reflect. I know when I'm in the red band, when I'm in the orange band, when I'm in the yellow band. So I know that there are those different levels. And sometimes when I'm trying to use kind of hot cross bun tools when I'm in the red, they don't work because my reflective brain is not switched on in the same way that it is when it's in the yellow band, when it's in that transitional state. So I completely recognize that, like, sometimes the red band, I understand the kind of different bands here, and sometimes the tools that are presented to us operate in the bands below red and orange.
Yeah, so when you're right up here, you won't even remember it.
Yeah.
I mean, the bits that you're talking about where I can remember would be sort of down here. There will be a bit of reflective capacity, but a person right at the top there would be a seething, raging wreck. They may, the best way to recall what would be happening is to look around their apartment or whatever to see what's broken. Because it's just such a heightened place to be. But once you're through this sort of level, this yellow transitional area, for those who trigger up, now some people trigger straight down, bear in mind, but for those people who trigger straight, once you're through this yellow band, it's quite hard to activate recuperative resources, or resources are going to diminish the intensity or the duration, which is why, again, this yellow band is such a useful therapeutic concept in my view, that transitional area. Is there anything else you want to comment on?
No, was that appropriate? Was that inappropriate?
No, it's up to you. Are you comfortable with that? I mean, I thought it was really interesting and useful.
I'm okay with that. Completely comfortable. We can move on.
Yeah. So here we go.
Colours. So blue band, transition band, great influence of the reactive. I get it.
Yeah. So again, you got that transitional area here, which again, as I say, is therapeutic gold dust in there. But as you're already saying, you're starting to talk about bands, and what you find with people and clients, whatever, with the rainbow map, they start to use the colours as a shorthand to themselves and to each other. Oh, I was yellow. I was yellow for half an hour. And then I think I went a bit orange, and and then I noticed that. So they start to use the banding colours as a communication tool.
That's really interesting, because as someone who's not seen this before, I can already tell you, not right now, but like in the past, when I've been red and when I've been purple, there are times where I feel my emotions taking over. But there are also times where I just shut them down completely. But actually having a tool to stop and say, I'm red, I'm purple, that initial identification is so helpful for then deciding to move forward and knowing what to do about it, how to progress.
Yeah, it's a way to communicate with yourself and notice yourself. Are you sorry?
In a consistent way. So that colour is almost the dictionary for your emotions and your thoughts and your feelings and your behaviors when you can't give yourself that language sometimes.
I think that's a really interesting point. Yeah, and you said in a consistent way and in a relative way, so you can scale stuff and set it off against each other rather than just experiencing yourself as just one big sort of undifferentiated, I'm trying not to say thing, but I've just said thing. So, but undifferentiated entity, if you want to say. I mean,
yeah, I get it.
Shall I move on, or is that okay?
All good. Green. Sorry, just a clarification. So when you say what fair and reasonable treatment or reasonable and fair treatment means to them, do you mean the behavior, like how they're treated by other people, or they're treating themselves?
All of that. When I first developed the rainbow map and the green band, I didn't pay that much attention to the green band, really. It's only through other therapists talking about it and the way they've used, I've sort of learned from them, and I suppose my practice over the years. But that green band is quite an important area. For people to compare the triggering from, you've got to compare it from somewhere. But also I found that for people who've come from particularly, abusive backgrounds, who maybe have very low self-worth, then the green band's actually been a place where, for everyone else, myself included, it's quite easy for me to say, well, if someone treats me like that, I don't think that's reasonable, or I think that's fair, or not. Quite a lot of people, people with very low self-esteem, very self-worth, they struggle even to say what green means to them. I mean, there's a client on the launch page and on the YouTube channel, there's a one-page summary from a person who talks about their experience of using the Rainbow Map, and that particular person, who's given full permission, that it's anonymized, so you don't know who it is. But for example, dating someone, at one point, if the person just talked about themselves, the other person talked about themselves all the way through the date, they didn't really know whether to judge that negatively or not.
Yeah, because they're so putting themselves second that reasonable.
Yeah, or, is that right, or is that okay or not? And now what they've used the green band to say, no, from my perspective, in my view, if I'm out for a date with someone and it's just me asking them questions about them all night, and there's nothing about, no, that's not okay to me. It's not saying that is right or wrong in reality, because it's all subjective. But it's the green band actually has been quite useful, and this has come about. I didn't predict this. Other therapists have really been instrumental in helping develop that concept, is enabling people to say, well, what do I mean by what is okay for me? What's my choice?
Yeah,
based on my self-worth, my value, whatever. So rather than it just being a okay place on the Rainbow Map that whereas the real work is done there and the real work is done there, no, a lot of really useful work can be done here.
For sure. And in the green band, would people be capturing kind of the emotions and thoughts and sensations and behaviors that they're experiencing when they are receiving reasonable and fair treatment, so they can kind of build up a knowledge bank of how that feels and then compare experiences? That.
What a lovely observation. Absolutely. I mean, it's so beautiful. Just to enable people to connect those different elements. So you're moving on to the columns.
Yeah.
But so people can target more, and they can know when things are okay, because people who are very dysregulated for whatever reason, the systems are confusing and opaque and surprising and uncertain. And the Rainbow Map helps just to help you start to see the trees for the wood, if you want to see.
Yep.
Anything else on there, or should we?
Let's move on. Make different ways of experience ourselves more explicit and distinct. Yep. So breaking it down and then providing a way for us to untangle. No, this makes a lot of sense. I have no kind of questions here.
Okay. The only thing I'd add there is the bit there, your thoughts. Typically, I know I train it like this, and a lot of therapists split that up into your styles of thinking and typical thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps you to say, well, as you start going up here, my styles of thinking become more critical, more exasperated, more narrow, much more critical of others. And some people, as they trigger down, they say, well, I become quite critical of myself. So you start to differentiate styles of thinking from typical thoughts. Like a typical thought might be, here we go again. Oh, not this. I thought we'd got over that. Whenever is this going to end would be a typical thought. So if you can start to generate awareness of styles of thinking and typical thoughts, that also can be very useful in noticing your triggered self in a more discreet way. Is that okay?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think having that stylistic view, as well as some of the vocabulary that people use, I mean, even if people can capture this as they become more aware what that vocabulary is, what the stylistic thought, like what style of thoughts they're having, that in itself is so kind of useful for when you are reaching that like less reflective state. It's written out for you. It's there.
Well, you basically, a lot of people use this as a note-taking tool. If you go to one of the reflection sessions, I think that's with Alison Curtis, she talks about one client who reduced it to a credit card side, which they held in their wallet, just to remind themselves to notice the discrete areas. So some people use it as a note-taking tool. So at the end of the day, they may just use the rainbow map to help them carry on noticing themselves in a discrete way and improving the resources, developing new ones. Absolutely. So it's quite a sophisticated and note-taking tool for the human system.
Oh, for sure.
If I might say so myself. Sorry if that sounded a bit arrogant there, but there you go. Sorry about that. Shall I move on? Is that all right?
The last point's really interesting. How we differ from I can't read today. How we differ from or match the trigger cycles of those that we interact with. I think from understanding kind of friends who have had either more difficult upbringings or challenging experiences, that bounce back rate is much slower, or can be much slower, than people who maybe have not experienced so much kind of trauma or difficulty. So is one of the outcomes of the rainbow map kind of speeding up those trigger cycles and reducing the intensity and duration of the triggering?
Totally. I mean, well, this came in at about the reason this came in is the versions of the rainbow map I was using in about 2016, but it didn't look too much like this, but similar shading and all the rest of it. Well, the clients that triggered up were populating this area, these areas, and then they would say, and after I had this, after I felt like this, I felt like this. No, I felt like that. And then clients just kept doing that. They kept saying, and so I started to see this pattern. And it seemed almost very much rule of thumb is the higher they went, the lower they seemed to go afterwards, and the longer it lasts. It's very loose rule of thumb, that. But people who triggered up seem to then afterwards transition miraculously and end up down, sad, depressed for a period of time before they recovered. And as you've seen, I've just drawn a trigger cycle, and that has proved to be a really useful piece of self-awareness. And down here, people could write their typical duration. I mean, people, you get all sorts of different patterns now. I won't go on too much because there's another module that covers this on the website, but some people trigger up into the yellow zone and then they're into mindfulness and they oscillate for a while.
Yep.
Before they finally take off if the source of the triggering is still there. Some people trigger up and then plateau for a while, hold on to it, get exhausted in that area, and then finally collapse down.
Yeah.
The commuter, the commuter that I talked about earlier sort of triggered up a little bit, but not too high, and then could calm down
quite quickly.
Yeah, but the reason for that is if you trigger much into the yellow zone, then the chemical production factory that the human body is producing mood altering hormones and chemicals. So momentum is set up. Your bloodstream is laced with mood altering chemicals.
Yeah.
your emotions will have built up a momentum. And remember, as one thought was an emotion might trigger a type of thinking, typical thoughts that then may generate a particular type of sensation, which will then influence the emotions. So the momentum, once you get up to this sort of level, the momentum is sort of built up that you're not just going to go straight down into green. Now, there are exceptions to that. People with DID, dissociative identity disorder, and I talk about that. Some unique individuals can trigger all the way up and go straight down to green. But it's very special. I mean, the theory base I developed predicts why that happens. And I've interviewed a number of people with DID who've come on the workshop, and, in terms of the types of events in a childhood or events in life that can generate DID. But for most of us, if we trigger up into the yellow zone, we will probably spend some time down here or down here. People who trigger straight down, well, they don't have the corresponding time above. People who trigger straight down, typically they're exhausted, or that style of triggering got trained in quite early on.
Yeah.
I'm starting to branch into slightly more detailed and more user type ways of connecting the rainbow map to other stuff, which you can use yourself or psychotherapists use.
Well, it's interesting because it's interesting that I find the user-friendly examples of trigger cycles really helpful. All of those different circles that you've drawn, I've experienced all of them. And the different types of cycles that I've experienced have all happened within the last year when I've been going to therapy.
Yeah.
Before that, I went straight down into the purple.
Yeah.
And that's maybe something you like, it's up to you whether you share that or not, but you're gonna have to do a lot of editing on me, Andrew. I apologize. But it's interesting to understand that. I think had I had this tool a year ago, I would have found it incredibly insightful to be able to understand which different triggers got me into different trigger cycles.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Different situations will generate different types of. Yeah. Some people in the home environment, in a couple relationship, may be so exhausted in that situation they just trigger straight down. Yeah. Outside in the world of work, they may trigger in a different way. But I've used this tool. Originally was developed for couple work, but it's now used much more with individual work. But that's because far more individual work is being done around the world than couple work. But in, say, a clearest example in couple work, if one member of the couple has a trigger cycle of, say, 3 days, they go like this, they spend about 2 hours there, and then they trigger up there, spend half an hour there, and then they spend 2 to 3 days down in the lower area before they recover, and their partner has a trigger cycle of, say, half a day, then you've got conflicting trigger cycle duration. So the person with half a day, they've recovered later the day or the next morning, and they say to their partner, oh, what should we do this weekend, or where are we going to go on holiday? And their partner, who is still down here, will say, sling your hook. You know, the last person I'm going to do anything with is you. So, and then they start to think that their partner has no empathy for them.
Yeah.
Because they're running different trigger cycles, and then that will trigger all sorts of new thoughts and sensations. So they may have conflicting trigger cycles that generate stuff. And that happens at work, with colleagues, that happens with individuals, with friends. You know, you wonder why they're not right, or why don't they get me? I'm still upset. So you can see the trigger cycle has been a really useful addition.
And I know you've been using the trigger cycle with psychotherapists, and also people have been using them on themselves.
Yes.
And that's from a point of view of trying to help, right? You're trying to give them tools that will build resources and help them manage their day-to-day lives. Have you ever, and I'm sure you have in the research, kind of use the trigger cycle and the rainbow map as an observational tool into different types of relationships?
Well, I don't really work, and most therapists don't work. It's not like observation in terms of analysis and all the rest of it. I mean, people have, each of us have the best information the world can provide to us, which is our own information and our own system. So I don't use it in a way that's analytical. Personally, in my work, it's informative to me to hypothesize and my clients in the same way. So I use it in a very collaborative way. And I think most psychotherapists use it like that. And not in a diagnostic way. Really.
Okay. That's interesting.
It will inform, and maybe there will be psychologists and clinical psychologists and clinicians who may use it like that. It might be a useful research tool.
Well, let's see if this in the future you'll be Thomas's rainbow map will have lots of psychotherapists doing analytical work on it.
Well, you don't know. I mean, it's been used with thousands of clients already around the world. I mean, it's widely used already. A lot of people are experiencing the rainbow map. So shall I move on?
Yes, let's move on.
Yeah. And there you have a completed one. So
nice. Okay. This might take me a little bit longer to just digest.
Yeah, I wouldn't read all of the comments in there. Maybe just read the side bit if you want, because what I was going to say here, just I'm butting in, sorry, but it's rare to find the whole of a rainbow map completed like this. You find parts of them completed and areas left blank.
Okay. This is uncommon, but entry that might be seen. And when you say they take 30 to 90 minutes, do you mean to work through what they're feeling at that point in time? So maybe the yellow or just the red or just the purple?
Say in therapy, a therapist using the rainbow map with a client, I suppose that's comment a little bit more direct to the psychotherapy world is, I know one psychotherapist who does it with all their clients virtually on entry to therapy and does it in about 30 minutes as an information collection tool, but they're working in a particular sphere. And others, I put 90 minutes. I'm aware of psychotherapists who will take many sessions over it, that it will stimulate conversation, and that's what they'll follow. And then maybe another few sessions they'll come back to the rainbow map. And so there's no, I've put 30 to 90, but it's very personal. Yeah.
Okay. Understand. There's no rule in terms of which column to start on first. It's good to see an example, especially that's fully populated, so that we can understand relatively what's going on.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So, okay. So you can see the trigger cycle.
Yeah.
And you get other things, just coming back to the triggers. I remember having a client that said, oh, I come into the blue zone and then I pretend to recover to the rest of the world.
Okay.
And as soon as I pretend to recover, I go right down and I'm there for about a week. So I remember that. I was a client I work with. So again, the trigger cycle offers all sorts of interesting insights and opportunities. Shall I move on? Because then are you all right? Sorry, I was whittling on there. Apologies.
Really interesting. Really, really interesting. Clenching right jaw is the first thing this person notices about themselves as they trigger away from the group. I relate, not to the clenching red jaw, but the sensation or the feeling, or increasingly actually nowadays the behavior is the first couple of things that I notice rather than the emotions and the thoughts. But in fact, stopping and recognizing the behaviors and the sensations then allows me to go back to the emotions and thoughts, which is actually not the more important bit, but the thing that personally I struggle with a bit more, and allows me to build that complete picture, which is what you really need to understand how to get out of the trigger cycle and back into the green. So
yeah, and that what you're saying, getting back into the green, yes, isn't it great to be okay? But very much to me, the rainbow map is enabling us to live our lives sort of in these areas.
Yeah,
it's okay to be a bit frustrated. It's okay to be a bit sad. What is harmful is if we're in these areas for a long period, or we even spend a short period up here. That's very harmful. It's very unpleasant to be there, even for a short period. People often occupy the lowest areas for long periods, and that's devastating and horrible.
Normalize it.
Yeah, so it's saying, hey, it's okay if we live our lives moving around between these areas. That's okay. That's what being a human is. I react a little bit to the modern world of we got to be happy. If you ever go to a dinner party or out and you meet someone new and they spend the whole evening telling you how wonderful and green effectively their life is, you're going to have probably a boring evening, and you're sitting next to someone who's probably kidding themselves as well. Because it's okay to get a bit angry. It's okay to be a bit sad, in my view. Others may disagree with that. But the rainbow map is a targeting tool to allow us to notice how we're doing on that.
Yeah.
And as you can see, I'm drawing a lot on it. And that's what people do. They interact, draw and point stuff.
Yeah.
But the trigger, sorry, Gashil, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I massively agree with like today's world trying to push everyone into the green all the time. Like we always have to be our happiest, most secure self. It's
getting a bit philosophical because that actually is generating ever more experiences in the yellow and blue.
Yeah.
I'm guilty. I'm not happy. I've got everything. I've got the latest iPod or iPod, that dates me, doesn't it? iPhone or whatever.
Overanalyzing whether you're in the green or whether you're in the yellow or whether you're in the blue, and really all of those are okay, but we're becoming kind of ever more critical on our own feelings. And like it's great to have the opportunity to understand them and observe them, but we don't always need to judge them.
Yeah, so it allows. Like the other day, I was feeling a bit agitated, but I was just running through using the rainbow map. You know, what is there any reason for me to feel a bit edgy? And then I started thinking, well, maybe I've picked this up. Maybe there's been some transference from a client or something, and my chemical system has just been nudged up a notch. So I'm picking that up. And it allowed me, and that's a resource. So I was thinking, is there anything really causing this? And then as I reflected on, no, there wasn't anything really material that I had to do it. I must have just been sort of in a way infected a little bit by some other stuff going on around me. And so that's an example of a resource, a reflective resource.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So clenching jaw, for example, sensations, behaviors are typically fairly reliable, but sometimes people will not put much in the sensations at all. They won't notice much about, but some very cerebral people will populate this quite intensively. So maybe a typical thought might be useful for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also it can also, not being diagnostic, but if there's nothing in this area, that can be quite interesting for the client about why there's no sensations, even when they trigger up. And that can be quite interesting in terms of how did their system get trained to desensitize themselves from their sensations and behaviors.
Even on the emotion side.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting one because emotions are in a way the backing music for everything else.
Mm-hmm. And if we look at kind of, in my experience, my personal kind of life, I kind of shut out the emotion. I don't have backing music really. So I have to rely a lot, or on my thoughts and my behaviors. And I'm trying to train myself to pay more attention to my emotions and my sensations. So I think the rainbow map is if you can recognize that if you're in like a certain band and then say, okay, well, there's a big glaring gap here, let's try and dig into that. It might help build some of that awareness in some of the columns that maybe people don't fare as well at compared to some of the other.
That's exactly what it's a bit about. I mean, if you say have ever been for lessons, say in tennis or anything, initially when you go to that lesson, the tennis racket is just a tennis racket. You have no idea how to hold it or not. The ball is just the ball. You don't know about spin or bounce.
Yeah.
But as you have lessons, things become more discrete, and because they become more discrete, you can do more stuff with it. You can intervene in a more precise and useful way. And that's really what the rainbow map is trying to help to do, is to make our awareness of ourselves more discrete. So, for example, if here, tight middle throat, if we were to highlight that, if someone's got a tight middle throat, a resource might be to relax the middle throat when they notice it.
Mm.
So by relaxing it, you're likely to reduce the power of the triggering. If you pick yourself up being critical of others, or maybe resources that bring forth when the person you're being critical of has done something very positive or very constructive, might diminish the power of that style. So they become targeted resources that reduce how long you might last in the yellow band and whether you go up any further.
No, absolutely.
Okay. So it can be a very useful resource generation and targeting tool. There's other modules on the website that go into that. You'll hear me use the language of resources quite a lot on anything I'm on or talking about. Is that okay? Shall I move on?
Trigger flag.
I've sort of covered that, I suppose, a bit.
Learning what our most reliable trigger flag is. Notice the reactive brain body away from the green. Activating resources in the traditional yellow. Yeah, we've
sort of covered that a bit, haven't we? And then we've talked a bit about the trigger cycle.
Being aware of our trigger cycle. Just how we interact with others. Yeah, interesting. We have spoken about adjusting how we interact with others who have different cycle durations and patterns in the context of close relationships. So, for example, couples. But you noted the dinner party and meeting someone for the first time, and how maybe someone who is trying to convey that they're in the green is going to annoy someone who's maybe in orange, red, purple, or blue. And I guess just even for someone to have resources on how they find it helpful to deal with those sorts of more distant situations that over time can add up into bigger kind of impacts on ourselves, that's also a really helpful tool.
Well, you trigger a thought in me. We use the terminology empathy, and we think about it as being empathetic to other people. But another outcome, I think, of the rainbow map is an empathy for yourself. To be able to be more tuned and notice. Mm-hmm. But rather than just in some how are you feeling type of way, it's in a much more discrete way, so you can actually notice the elements. Because if you can't, in my view, typically work on yourself or with other people from emotions. Emotions, as I said, are a lovely backing. They're the outcome of all the other stuff. The mood music of what we're experiencing. But you can't just say to someone, be less frustrated, or be less frightened. It doesn't work like that. Whereas if you can actually get at the drivers, the styles of thinking, the typical thoughts, the sensations that are being triggered and contributing to that, and the behaviors that are all part of that. I mean, what this sort of shows, and in my view, that humans make meaning of the world with their whole everything.
Yeah.
It's not just a little part of the brain, it's a whole interplay of everything.
Yeah, for sure. I was also going to say that having empathy for yourself is not something that people are trained out of that.
Yeah, so what you're getting at another module about what's called legacy behaviors, you know, the training out of it. That at certain points in our lives, stuff that really helped us later in other parts of life becomes discordant and generate problems. That happens to us all. But originally that stuff was there in a way to optimize our level of discomfort. This is, I'm getting, if you really get into the avoidance theory module, which underlies all of this, if you really want to get into this, again, it's not complex language, but what that's saying is we're all the time trying to optimize our level of discomfort with whatever we've got within us and around us. So it changes how we look at people with anorexia, because I see anorexics as stone cold rational. You know, it's a very uncomfortable experience being anorexic, but it's the anorexic's best attempt with what they've got within them and outside of them to generate the least uncomfortable experience day to day for them in their lives. Because if they eat too much or the wrong thing, that will generate levels of discomfort that are higher than they're already experiencing. So an anorexic is doing the best with what they've got, which is rather than treating them as somehow dysfunctional and yes, somehow lesser. You know, I like to think of all the people I'm working with them as doing the best with what they've got, and our work is to generate different resources that will shift where they can optimize their level of discomfort. Sorry, I'm whittling on. Anyway, are you all right? Shall I move on? Or
yeah, let's move on.
And I suppose I'm getting on to resource generation. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself there. Sorry.
Lining closing the overhand signifies what they might experience. I understand it. I have a question around whether in the pursuit of thinking of ways to reverse some of the entries that we may have made at the time, is it indeed useful to think about, okay, in the green, what are some of the behaviors that help maintain the green?
Absolutely.
And then using those to move down from yellow to green or up from blue to green, and just trying to, you know, use some of those behaviors that keep you healthy to make you kind of untriggered again.
You're doing already what I find clients and people do with the Rainbow Map. You're generating your own ways of using it.
Yeah.
I mean, I train it when I've been training all the therapists when I was doing the workshops, which are now transferred on through this and other modules onto that. That I said, well, I might train it in this way. It's how you want to use it. It's what works for you. So you're already generating ideas and thoughts about how you would use it. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And I guess just that understanding of there is flexibility. There's no one right way. There's no kind of like hard and fast method to using this. It's kind of like you have to experience it in real time, and then you'll start to understand more what is most useful for you.
I've been running what's called a grounded theory research project alongside this for 3 or 4 years now. One of the areas that are getting what's called saturated is this is a normalization experience. So people see the rainbow map, it's a very blank document, but then they find themselves mapping onto it. And so there's a sort of sense that, hold on, this wasn't designed just for me. This is designed for any human. So maybe I'm not so uniquely blighted. Maybe there are other people experiencing what I'm experiencing. Maybe, I'm not saying it's a major thing, but it is helpful sometimes to be able to be aware that other people are mapping onto this as well. And so there are other people, other situations that connect with you, that you're not uniquely blighted. Anyway, so.
And that's really helpful to have that kind of support system of other people using this tool.
Yeah.
Just sharing how kind of what their experiences are with it.
It's very much use that in couple work for sure. That both members have it and they start to be able to relate in a different way. Anything more on there?
Nope, all good.
Okay. And there are one or two different versions.
Different versions of the rainbow map. Just a question on the symbols in the behaviors column highlight the reduction in reflective capacity. What do you mean by that?
That I mean by that is an error. You've just picked out an error.
I was trying not to critique, but
no, you picked out an error. So thank you. I'll I'll make sure I keep this in the final cut as well. Just it's an error. I just I've taken that out really. So sorry about that. So
question marks indicate that some do not trigger to that level. All makes sense. So I think, are the numbers kind of indicating how many emotions you're feeling and how many you're feeling, or is it?
Right. No, it's just the idea of the labels is just say I was working with someone online, I could say I'm looking around number 3, and then we'd both know very quickly it's number 3.
Oh, right. Okay.
Or if I said E, they know it's below the green band, so it allows you to know. It's just a variant that some people like using. The question marks are there because not everyone who works with the rainbow map goes that high or that low.
Okay, so it's like a navigation.
It's just a navigation thing.
Fine, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Nothing wildly kind of
nothing
standing out here on this slide. So maybe let's move to the next one.
Yeah. Colorless version. No, I forgot to highlight the previous one. If you're working with a colorblind person, they've got the numbers help there as well.
It's really helpful.
Numbers and letters, I should say.
Yeah, really interesting.
This came from an art therapist who wanted a blank one so they could work with clients to color it in. So,
oh my God, that's really cool. Like, I can only imagine what might come out of different people's kind of canvases.
Yeah,
it becomes a rainbow canvas, not a rainbow map.
Yeah, yeah. So, are you okay with that?
Yeah, all makes sense. Let's move on. Aid words are graded to very useful for me personally. I honestly, when I go into anything that's not green, I have no idea how I feel.
Okay, so it's it's not diagnostic, it's just a cueing thing.
Yeah, it's a prompt. It's like, are you feeling something along these lines?
That's it.
Or is it something else? And I'm sure I'm not the only one. There's probably loads of people who struggle with identifying emotion.
Yeah, I found on the workshop some psychotherapists or counsellors struggled with this because there was a bit of a worry that it might be too leading, too diagnostic. And quite a lot of that's fine. Quite a lot of psychotherapists and people won't use this at all. I use it quite a lot with clients.
Yeah.
A lot of therapists use it quite a lot.
Yeah.
But it's quite easy. You know, my training, probably by nature, is to use language, to use words, when you're training to be a psychotherapist counselor, you do reflective essays. So you're being asked to develop the muscles to enable yourself to use language to describe. Now, our clients don't come from that world. So this was very much developed with recognition of that to help clients step into this world, but in a way that wasn't too directional.
Yeah.
That's
and you triggered, sorry, funny word to use. I just had a thought, maybe this version is more useful to people who struggle identifying certain thought, sensation, behaviors. Like maybe it's up to the individual even to say whether it's helpful for them or not, or whether.
Yeah, very much so. Anything more on that, or?
I think it's really, really helpful how you've broken down the different body parts. It almost matches up to typical kind of headspace tools where they say scan your body from head to toe and what do you feel.
Well, yeah, that comes very much also from a theory called the polyvagal theory. So for those who are tuning into this, there's a myelinated to unmyelinated progression in terms of the nervous system. So if you Google the polyvagal theory, anyone into that they'll probably resonate with that. So and when I'm working with it, I get the clients to become quite precise in what they're noticing sensation wise, again to increase that discreteness, that those access points. Anyway, I'm getting a bit too passionate or onto it there. So over to this one. We're coming to an end now.
Quick intro. Yep, all clear.
Yeah.
Good that you've got kind of deep dive modules into different situations.
Yeah.
Applications.
And while I expect most psychotherapists and counsellors to be most interested in that, the general members of the public will probably find them interesting as well, I think.
Yeah.
Well, that's my view anyway. So.
Yeah, if they're curious. Other tool orientation modules of possible interests. When you say legacy behaviors, it's interesting that you've noted experiencing intense resistance. In my experience, in my brain, I've been very kind of open to therapeutic change, but my body is so used to it has such a strong survival kind of mechanisms that are so like tightly wound together that the resistance doesn't come from my intentions, it just comes from my wiring.
Yeah, so the legacy behavior experience, as I call it, I mean, it's a module, but the legacy behavior experience is quite a systematic stepping through to understand how your system got trained. It's connected with quite a lot of theory, again, very accessible. You'll see stuff on the next page. But if someone is really struggling to change in psychotherapy, you know, to use it to influence in a reasonable time, I'm not saying overnight or anything like that, the legacy behavior experience can be something that can be very helpful in unblocking the logjam. and letting things start to flow again.
Yeah, really interesting. I'm cool to go to the next module.
Yeah.
Next slide. Seen the word module quite a bit.
Yeah.
I really didn't realize that avoidance theory was the stepping stone to all trigger orientated theory. That's mind.
I started developing the Rainbow Map in 2014. I was using it with clients. It looked quite different from this. But in 2016, I thought I already had the theory base to it, but I went away and spent 2 years effectively in Purda before I started training other people, because I thought I needed to make absolutely sure that the theory base below this is there. Some may question it or challenge it, but I can just, if anyone wants to talk to me about the theory behind the Rainbow Map, why anything is the way it is, then there is a theory base underneath that. I mean, there is another theory below the avoidance theory, but I developed that, but I have to drink about 2 or 3 glasses of wine each time I revisit it to really, for me to start getting into and understanding it. But the avoidance theory theory I've developed is very accessible, quite challenging. It challenges some of the things we might hold as just the way the world is.
Yeah.
So, for the last nearly a year now, I've had very experienced psychotherapists and other people I know are highly analytical, that I've tasked them with trying to destroy avoidance theory. But unfortunately, no, so far, all of them have basically turned their worldview to avoidance theory.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know too much about it, but it might be interesting to read into.
I think, most people find it, really very interesting, quite stimulating, in my view.
Yeah. If you need glasses of wine to talk about,
it's not
avoidance theory.
No, it's not inaccessible. It's written in a way that's very, I would hope, accessible.
Okay.
So, are you okay with that? Those are the other modules that might link to this one.
Yeah. It would be really interesting to see actually how it all ties together. Maybe I'm on the intensely curious end of the spectrum, but I like to think about all the connections between things because I think they're all relevant. They all influence the end outcome and how we get to where we are today.
You want to think maybe the Rainbow Map is a tip of quite a large iceberg.
Yeah, absolutely. Reflections. Therapy. Read to write about their experience of working. Yeah. It's interesting that the client here has written while I will still be triggered. There's almost an acceptance around that feeling of it's okay to be triggered, but I know how to, I'm comfortable in knowing that I now have the resources and the tools to be able to handle that.
Well, here's the thing. One of the reasons I developed this is I was a bit uneasy with this sort of sense as well. I'm not saying all clients or all psychotherapists look at this or the world, is that psychotherapy or self-help books are a way just to become okay all the time. I thought a lot of my work is helping people, and what I've done here is helping people live with their system.
Yeah.
Because our systems are evolved to generate discomfort. That's what
For a reason.
our systems are extremely good at generating intense levels of discomfort. There's a reason for that, because it drives learning.
Yeah.
And if you get into the avoidance theory, you'll see where that plays out right in the first minutes and hours of our lives and days of our lives. We have to go to drugs, LSD or cannabis or whatever, to amplify the positive experiences we can, or throw ourselves down ski slopes to get exhilaration.
Yeah.
So, but our systems are very good at generating discomfort. So is that all right? That's just an example. When the client did this, I was just bowled over by what this person wrote. I was very careful about when it was asked for, the stage of the work we were doing, but what this person delivered was just quite remarkable. So that's why I've wanted to include it. I mean, I like clients reflecting on stuff. So here we go. Summary. Last 2 slides.
Yep, makes complete sense.
Yeah, is that all right?
Carry on, and then I'll tell you what I was thinking, because I think the summary will fit together, right? Because there's a second slide. Cool. What can we use to support my capacity to move towards? Yeah. If you've ever been on a bouldering wall, you'll know that it's not a comfortable experience. So identify resources that we already have. Yeah. No, I completely agree with it.
And that is it, Gasheel. Any final questions or reflections or thoughts?
Nope, all good. I think that summarizes everything we've spoken about.
I mean, I've put that there because, to me, a lot of times when people are reaching out for tools like the Rainbow Map or a self-help book or going to therapy, in a way they're standing in front of one of these, metaphorically, one of these walls, and they know there's a different place they want to be. Somewhere up there's a different place I want to be, but effectively the wall doesn't have many handholds or footholds. So in a way, they're stymied to get to a place where the discomfort will be at a lower level.
Yeah.
And so what the Rainbow Map and other tools and so they're sort of generating resources and awareness, which are these handholds and footholds to help us move away from where we maybe don't want to be, towards a place that might deliver us a little bit more of our lives in the green, yellow and blue bands to a more comfortable extent.
An interesting observation around the bouldering or climbing wall is that bouldering is done without the harness. Yeah. Climbing is done with the harness, as is shown on the slide. And I think it's interesting to note that even though the next handhold or foothold may not be available, it's important to note that just because you don't know it right now doesn't mean you've fallen off the wall completely.
No.
Just means that you're hanging in midair and supported by, a harness and maybe one foot, but you'll get, the foothold or the handhold will appear. But
if it means it to you, you obviously know a lot more about this than I do. But Gasheel, I thank you so much. Thank you for spending time with us today, the people who will tune in and benefit from your reflections.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've really reflected and asked some really wonderful questions and thoughts. So and saved people from me just whittering on about some dry PowerPoint presentation. So thank you so much, Gasheel.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
So I think I better let you get on with your day. Thanks a lot, Gasheel.
Absolutely.
Gasheel, your reflections and wonderful questions enriched the presentation in my view. Thank you again for giving up your time to join us today. If this and other modules on this website have been of interest and use to you, perhaps I could ask you to share a link with friends and colleagues who might also benefit from this free resource. Maybe you could also put a link out on social media you might use. That really would be very helpful. For those of you watching this for your ongoing training, please remember you can go back to the launch page for this module and request a training certificate free of charge. That launch page also holds PDFs, downloads of PowerPoint presentation we've just gone through, and downloads of the two main versions of the Rainbow Map, and a colourless version that art therapists are using, plus other related support materials. You can also see a list of related modules on the website should you wish to know more about the Rainbow Map, other tools, and the concepts on which they're based. If you and 10 or more friends or colleagues want to dig deeper into any aspect of this or other modules on the website, then you can book a free Zoom-based question-answer reflection session to suit your time zone. Thanks for spending your time with me and Gesheil today.